You're listening to the final episode of DePauw Art Time Capsule. This episode will feature Molly Murphy and Professor Elissa Harbert on DePauw's music community and practices. Of all the art forms on campus, music is perhaps the most in flux. In May 2023, DePauw University announced via email that 2 music degree programs would be cut. The remaining music degree programs will be part of the DePauw Creative School when it opens in fall 2024. Molly Murphy was a DePauw senior. You might recognize her as Alice Beinecke in DePauw's production of the Addams Family musical, or from one of her many solos as part of DePauw choirs. This year, she sang as one of the voices of Joan for the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra's production of the film The Passion of Joan of Arc. Molly had one more semester left at DePauw, but after this interview was recorded, Molly decided to finish her college experience elsewhere due to negative changes in the music student experience. Here's my interview with Molly. How are you today, Molly?
I'm doing all right. How are you, Taylor?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
What is it like being a music student at DePauw?
Currently, it is very interesting. I've had the past 4 years here. I'm currently a senior, so I've been here since 2020. We just had the pandemic. Today is like the 4-year anniversary of when everything was told that we're gonna shut down.
You're right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we're recording this on March 11th, 2024.
Which we just brought up in my last class, and that was a crazy thing for me to think about because it feels so long ago.
It does.
Especially the graduating class of 24. We went through so much through high school and then the transition into college with COVID. It's been interesting, and especially as a School of Music student, we've seen the growth of coming out of the pandemic. We no longer have to have 4 small choir groups, and instrumentalists can play without bags over their instruments and wearing face masks. That's been on my mind quite a bit today. But on top of that, I think currently being a School of Music student is pretty well. I can say that overall. We just got finished with the opera, and we're continuing with more and more of our events that are coming up in the spring.
Yeah, you just finished up an oratorio over
Yes.
this past weekend as of our recording. You are hearing one of the voices of Joan, who performed with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra.
Yes, we just finished that. It was over a 2-hour silent film that we got to sing over, which was so cool. We got to work with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra and work with the maestro that they have. It was an amazing experience.
What are some of the other things you've done in your time as a student here that you're most proud of?
Besides being a School of Music student, I've been involved with Bonner. I'm a Bonner scholar. So I've gotten to work really closely with different nonprofits in the Greencastle and Putnam County area. Besides that, I think one of my favorite things that I've done here is being a part of the theater program and really just getting involved in those types of things, because I was scared they would interfere with each other due to scheduling, but it hasn't. So I'm very excited I got that opportunity.
How have you been able to be involved in both things?
So many schedules and calendars. Finding out what really works and what doesn't with time, because sometimes you do have to say no to cool opportunities, especially at DePauw. I feel like there's always things that people can do. We're always trying to fill our time as DePauw students. So it's trying to figure out which is going to take your priority, your top priority right now, and which one isn't.
So the music school is a relatively small community on campus. In the fall 2023 semester, there were about 68 total students. What is that community like? What is being part of that community like?
That community, again, it brings back to the pandemic thing. With COVID, we started off with We used to live, all of the School of Music students that were on campus, in the same dorms. So that community was so small, it was hard to interact with people who were like still a part of that same community. So then it was interesting to see like post-pandemic, where we have, all of us are very well interactive with each other. It is a very well-knit community. How do I explain this? It's a good question.
What are the interpersonal dynamics like with the music students, since it's such a close group?
It is very like, I don't want to say family. I'm like, we're not a family. But it is very like, on a professional level, like you just really get to go and meet with the people that like you're collaborating with. And you know that sometimes the material you collaborate on isn't what we all want to go into sometimes, because we have different people here who like are really interested in composing. We don't have a composition major, but they're still able to like work with us, and we're able to work with them. And I think things like that, those are the moments and interactions that kind of like stick with me most.
What do people that aren't part of the School of Music community miss about it? What do they not understand?
I think the biggest thing is always when someone asks me, like, how do you do it? Is like, they're like, because you're so busy all the time. School of Music students typically take more than 4 classes a semester. So it is very difficult to go through. I mean, it's easier because a lot of these classes you can use the core concepts of one in another. So that makes it a little easier to kind of go between all of the courses. But I think that like the time and the commitment it takes is just something that no one can really understand unless you yourself try to do the same things.
Can you explain what a typical schedule is like, or what your schedule this semester is like, just to give people a sense of what you mean?
Yeah, so this semester is one of my lighter loads, which is crazy to say because it's still kind of busy. But typically, right now, I am in 2 CLA courses, which is a first for me. That has been new. So 2 CLA courses. I'm then in 2 music courses. I have my voice lessons. I have coachings with our collaborative pianists. And we also all have to take, every School of Music student that's able to, concert attendance, which is a 0 credit course. Of course, we also have our ensemble, which for me is choir and festival choir. I believe that's it. But I think on my e-services it shows 7 courses. So for me, that is a new low for how many I'm taking this semester.
How have those lessons and classes impacted you as a performer?
As a performer, these types of classes have helped me so much. Even if in the moment I'm kind of like, why am I learning this? We all have that moment where it's just, why am I in this? Does this really benefit me? I think even going through those moments are significantly helpful, especially with like voice lessons. We've had a lot of like School of Music faculty come in and out over the past 4 years. So I switched my voice lesson professor along with my collaborative pianist at some point. And it was a very hard transition because you really get so close to these professors. Like you said, we're a small community. We have a small amount of students, but an even smaller amount of professors who take on so much more than we do with our however many classes we take. So I think that is the relationship we really get to form with those professors are the most impactful and helpful things.
Are there any specific lessons you've learned from one of those faculty members that like jumps out to you?
I would definitely, my advisor is Will Pearson. I love him. He is absolutely amazing. I will forever remember, this was before he was even my advisor, my freshman year, there was a piece that I did and I created, and I titled it, "I am not a composer, I don't know what I'm doing." It had a kazoo solo in it and everything.
I love that.
It was, I was really just like, I don't know what to do for this, but I'm going to try. And I did. But the feedback that he then gave me on that paper was like, hey, I know you're like being a little self-deprecating right now. It's funny. Like, he knew that was partially my sense of humor, but he was still able to give me like such helpful criticism and critiques to just help me improve, not only as a musician, but also be like, yeah, you may not know what you're doing right now, but like, you're on a really good track. And I just remember walking out of like my room at the time, because the class was online. But I walked out of my room that day like feeling really happy and proud of myself. And moments like that continue to happen, but that was one of the first and biggest ones that still stick with me.
Okay, so we're at this like high point and we're going to completely switch it around. Is there anything you dislike about being a music student?
Where do I start?
Oh no.
Well, no, it's not anything super bad. It's really, I think the biggest thing is just all the changes that have been happening on DePauw's campus. It's been kind of like a time of confusion. We don't really know what's going to happen, but we're just going to continue to do what we do, I guess.
How did you feel when you found out about a lot of the changes that university update email sent at the end of spring 2023 comes to mind?
Oh boy, when that email was sent out, I remember that day so vividly. It was so, it was very emotional because it was just kind of like randomly thrown. Like, we heard talks of the creative school beforehand, and just getting that email being like, here's all the cuts. It was out of nowhere. It was heartbreaking to kind of see, like, at least I can say that when I saw that email, it was kind of like a death sentence. You know, it was a sentencing to put these programs away. I know that is not their intention at all, nor do I believe it is. But it really did come across that way. It was a little bit of like whiplash, where you didn't really know what was going on. So it felt very like somewhat powerless.
Powerless.
Yeah, because what do you do when people are telling you that like the path you're currently on is going to be like taken away? Because especially like I was a junior at the time when that email came out. So it's like I knew my course wasn't going to be affected. Like, I'm still able to walk out of here with my degree that like I wanted, and same with everyone else that's currently here. But I still care about the future of like this program. I'm like, I've learned so much from it, and I know other people can too. Like, DePauw was my top school since the end of my junior year. So I'm like, that was a very impactful moment, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. To wrap things up, I guess, what are your hopes and fears for the creative school?
I truly do hope that like School of Music students will be able to go out and expand into the creative school and take those courses if they wanted to, because I know a lot of is like scheduling issues with School of Music just due to like their requirements. So I do hope that there is a lot more like collaboration between all of the arts within the creative school. I guess one of my biggest fears is that like the way that they meaning like anyone who's giving these kinds of announcements, such as like the board or any emails from Dr. White, I think one of my biggest fears with that is that that was a death sentence, and now we're seeing the execution happen a lot sooner than any of us anticipated. I know I can be sometimes a pessimist. So I'm really hoping that's not the case. I have a lot of hope, though, for collaboration continuing to flourish with the arts. I believe the students that DePauw will attract hopefully continue like this kind of spirit.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your views on all of this.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. That was recent DePauw music student Molly Murphy. Molly had one more semester left at DePauw. But after this interview was recorded, Molly decided to finish her college experience elsewhere due to negative changes in the music student experience. Next, you'll hear from Professor Elissa Harbert, who has taught at DePauw since 2015. She specializes in musical theater, but she is an expert in many different music types. Professor Harbert teaches music history. She regularly teaches courses such as History of Broadway Musicals, Music and the Vietnam War, Women in Western Music, History of Western Music Surveys, Senior Seminar, and Exploring Music in History and Culture. Here's my interview with Professor Harbert. So my first question for you is, what subjects do you teach for those who are unfamiliar with hearing your name?
I am a music historian, and I teach the history of mostly Western music, a little bit of music from around the world. I teach a lot about music and culture, music and gender, musical theater. So my classes are more like a history class than like a band rehearsal or a flute lesson. So it's a more of a classroom environment where we do readings and listen to music and talk about it. I also teach a lot of first-year seminars, senior seminar, and really anything that intersects with music and history.
Why is it important for music students to learn this history?
For lots of reasons. I think that when we learn about history, we start to have empathy for other people. And when we learn about what they've gone through, what they struggled with in their lives, then we learn about perspective for ourselves. In addition to learning how to play the music in a stylistically appropriate way for the era, or learning about the composers and who they were and what their priorities were, it's just about being a human.
So what kinds of music do you and your colleagues make sure that music students are most familiar with?
So in the past, say 10 years ago and before that, it was only Western European classical music and jazz. And that was the priority without any question. Since I've been here, that's shifted a huge amount, so that now I teach all sorts of different kinds of popular music. I try to integrate music from different parts of the world to the extent that my expertise allows that. And many of my colleagues are also diversifying the repertoires. So I think that what students can expect to learn about is the diversity of musics around the world, and also the traditions of Western classical music that have always been the dominant tradition in formal schools of music.
How is it interacting with other faculty members in the School of Music? What kind of interpersonal relationships do you have with each other?
We've been through a lot together. We've been through a lot of turmoil. We've been through, I think I've had 7 or 8 different deans, and I've only been here for 8 years. And all of that change can really help you to value the things that stay constant. There are faculty members in the School of Music who have been here for 50 years. There are faculty members who are brand new and will only be here for a year. I try to be friendly with all of them. We're not a family, we're coworkers, right? We respect each other's boundaries. Most of my faculty member colleagues, many of them live outside of Greencastle, right? So some of us socialize, some of us don't, but I think that we have a pretty friendly collegial relationship. Now, I'm a little different because I don't perform on campus. I don't perform music, so many of my colleagues are collaborating musically with each other, which breeds a whole different kind of relationship when you're playing duets together.
So you mentioned there was a lot of change and turmoil that you had gone through in your time here. How do you think that's affected your classes, if it has?
Every student who goes through DePauw, this is their time, right? And so when their time is interrupted by, say, a pandemic for 2 years or more, when their time is interrupted by a chaotic dean who tries to change everything really quickly, or when their time is interrupted by massive degree cuts and budget cuts, that's their only time in college, right? So I have a perspective because I just stick around and I just ride the waves. For my students, it's high intensity. Like, this is the only time they get here. And I think that all of that turmoil, some of it DePauw is not to blame, obviously, for the pandemic. And I think that DePauw handled the pandemic extremely well, considering everything. But it's not the kind of experience that people expect, because it is, by definition, a whole bunch of unexpected chaos. And so I think a lot of students feel the stress of that. They feel like some of them feel like they got cheated out of an experience that was advertised to them when they were recruited. Some of them feel like other students got a better deal than them because they didn't have to have 2 years of online Zoom classes. And of course, that is certainly objectively true. But I think ultimately life is like this. Life is chaotic. Things change unexpectedly. There are cuts to what you can do, and college isn't perfect, just like life isn't perfect. So I have a lot of empathy for students who have felt like they're in a kind of a tornado of change at the School of Music. And I certainly have felt like that too as a faculty member. But in a way, it's kind of training you for the unexpected shifts that are just inevitable in modern life.
What relationships do you and other music faculty that you know have with your students?
Well, I think we're very, very lucky to see the same students multiple times in classes. So a studio faculty member, somebody who teaches, let's say, voice lessons or violin lessons, that person is going to meet with each of their students one-on-one, at least an hour every week for the whole time that student is here. So that is a very intensive relationship. Mine is more typically, the student will take several classes with me. And so we get to know each other. I like to do independent studies. I do honor scholar supervising as well. I love to go on tours or winter term trips with the students, and that can really become an incredible bond when you have those shared international experiences. So I feel very, very fortunate to have close relationships with a lot of my students, regardless of what they go on to do for their careers. But I do have a few students who have kind of followed in my footsteps in a way, which is a huge honor.
A huge honor.
To become, a student wants to become a musicologist because, they were inspired by me and my colleagues. It's a dangerous career path to take up, but it's really kind of special when a student decides that they want to do what I do.
Why is it dangerous?
Because there are very, very few jobs. It's very difficult to get a job in my field.
What do you think it takes to be a music major here at DePauw? What qualities do you see in these students that you teach?
I think they need to be very self-directed compared to perhaps a CLA student who is always working in a group. To be an instrumentalist or a vocalist, a performance major, you really have to practice on your own a whole lot. And you are having those one-on-one lessons with a faculty member, so you really have to carry your own weight a lot. And I was a music major, of course, in college, and I found that my independent ability to self-discipline, my ability to kind of stand on my own was pretty much the most important thing. And then there's also just resilience and grit, which every student has to have. In music tends to be very perfectionist, and if you make a small mistake, it can be, depending on the kind of music you're playing, obviously, but if you make a small mistake, it can be quite obvious, and students often will take that as a sign that they are bad at what they're doing. It doesn't mean you're bad. It means you made a mistake, or it means something went wrong that wasn't even in your control. So having that resilience to keep going, not get discouraged when you make a mistake when you're playing, I think is extremely important for any musician. And it's a good skill to cultivate just as a person, no matter what you do for your career.
What are some things that you feel like have remained consistent about the DePauw School of Music throughout the entirety that you've worked here?
A number of tenured faculty members have been here the whole time I've been here. Several, but we've had an enormous amount of turnover of faculty retiring, leaving. We had one very beloved person pass away who was just my age, which was incredibly sad. So the personnel has changed a huge amount. The students obviously have changed a lot, just the way that they are. You know, we've seen sort of a generational shift. I think very little is the same as it was when I got here, especially because of the pandemic. Things are just not the same as they were before that. So things have stayed the same in name, like we have similar kinds of events, but the feeling of them is often a little bit different than it used to be. And that's such a good question. It seems like an enormous amount of change since I've been here.
How has the feeling of certain events changed?
Well, they're less attended. When I got here, we were having the Green Guest Artist Series is a concert series that brings high-profile performers to campus. And when I first got here, we were having something like 8, I can't remember exactly how many, but maybe 8 events a year. And people from all over Indiana would show up to these events. So we'd have very high-profile artists, and we'd have a huge audience packing Kresge Concert Hall. Now, not only do we not have the budget to publicize these events, so even when we do have high-profile artists, we don't get anywhere near the number of audience members, but we're also having way fewer of these events, and the sort of name recognition of the artists is quite a bit lower. So budget cuts have really eaten into our most high-profile events. The feeling at other kinds of events, it's just there are fewer people coming out to see music live, and there are fewer community members coming to the holiday gala, for example, which we put on every year. I think that that's both a combination of having a lower marketing and advertising budget, as well as people are just staying home more than they used to before the pandemic. It's certainly improved. It's definitely bounced back from how it was in 2021 and 2022, but it's not anywhere near like it was in 2019.
Okay, and one final question for you, Dr. Harbert. What hopes and fears do you have for the creative school and changes it might bring to the music community at DePauw?
My main fear is that it will be a creative school in name only, and that it'll just continue to be a set of separate departments just like it is now, with sort of a slightly different upper level organizational structure, because I think real positive change is possible, and I think that we can have a lot more interdisciplinary collaboration that would be really exciting. I mean, these are some of my hopes. My fear is that nothing will actually change. It will just be a new name on, a new bottle, old wine. But my main hope is that more students from the whole university will participate in all of the creative arts, especially music. I mean, this has been something I've tried to encourage since I've been here, is bringing more non-music majors into the School of Music's offerings, classes, ensembles, lessons. And I want to make it more accessible to everyone at DePauw. And so that's my hope, is that it's going to be sort of less exclusive because we've had our more intensive degrees have been cut already. So it's going to be less, I guess, elite in terms of who makes music at DePauw. And hopefully that means more open to everybody to enjoy making music at whatever level they're currently doing so. So I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of concerns. But ultimately, for each student, it's going to be a different place, right? Each student is going to experience a different creative school.
Thank you for listening to DePauw Art Time Capsule. This project took a lot of time. Thank you for listening to DePauw Art Time Capsule. This project took a lot of time and effort, so it means the world to me that you have listened. DePauw's artists were some of my favorite people to interview during my time in college, so this project has been a lot of fun for me, but it also showed me what an expansive and wonderful community exists on DePauw's campus. This project was originally meant to be an audio time capsule to preserve what DePauw's art communities are like prior to the opening of the creative school, which will undoubtedly change a lot. But early on, I decided to ask everyone about their hopes and fears for the creative school. People have different views, but almost everyone said in one way or another that they hope the creative school works. The official opening isn't far away now, so it isn't long until we see a glimpse of the future of art at DePauw. So here's to the artists, old DePauw. Best of luck out there.